Welcome. I am Terry Tropin, and today I'm presenting a lesson on ICD-10-CM coding for external cause codes, specifically transport accidents. This, I think, is the most confusing area of all of the external cause codes. First, let me introduce myself. I have a master's in healthcare administration informatics from University of Maryland Global Campus and have RHIA and CCSP certifications. Also, I'm an AHEMA approved ICD-10 trainer. I have taught health information technology at Montgomery College for over 20 years. I also have written books on coding. These books are study guides that summarize the coding guidelines. My books include one on E&M coding, ICD-10-CM coding, ICD-10-PCS coding, and one on external cause coding. These are available on Amazon. What are external cause codes? These are used to report environmental events and circumstances that cause injury and other adverse effects. So things outside the body that affect the body, that injure the body. They also provide data for injury research and evaluation of injury prevention strategies. Very important, these codes are never listed first. Usually you'll have a code from Chapter 19 first, but not always. So it will depend on the circumstances. Now for documentation for external causes, the coding should be based on the physician documentation, but if there's no documentation from the physician, you could also use a documentation from nursing or ambulance personnel. Where are the external cause codes? That's the next big question. This is a separate index from the alphabetic index used for other codes. The separate index is located after the table of drugs and chemicals. So it's not a bad idea to tab this because it's very easy to miss and forget. I find myself looking in the alphabetic index for something and go, why is it here? Why isn't it here? Well, it's because it's the external cause index, not the alphabetic index. Now, the actual external cause codes are in the tabular list in Chapter 20, following Chapter 19, a whole separate chapter on external causes. First, let's define some terms. Traffic means an accident on a public highway, a street, highway, state road, that kind of thing. A non-traffic accident is one on other roads, a privately owned road, a driveway, or an off-road area. Sometimes a vehicle runs into a stationary object. That's like a telephone pole or a wall, not a person or a vehicle. An occupant of a vehicle is someone not identified as the driver, a hanger-on, or a passenger. This term is also used for codes for injuries when the patient was boarding or alighting a vehicle. When a patient is getting into or out of a vehicle, they're not really a driver or a passenger. Therefore, they are considered an occupant. Let's look at some more definitions. An accident is described as a collision accident when one vehicle or person is hit by another vehicle. A non-collision accident is when no collision is involved. An example of a non-collision accident is a car that overturned due to ice on the road or had mechanical problems that led to an injury, like the brakes didn't work, and so it fell over an embankment. Guidelines for transport accidents are in your ICD-10 book at the beginning of Chapter 20. The guidelines for these codes state that you should assume a transport accident was indeed an accident unless it's specifically stated otherwise. If an accident was documented as an assault or suicide attempt, use different codes to indicate this. You also assume an accident was on a public highway, meaning in traffic, if not otherwise specified, except if it's an all-terrain vehicle. There are special guidelines for military vehicles. If an accident occurs during military operations, such as peacekeeping mission or on a military base, use a code from Y36 to Y37, not transport accidents. Most military vehicle accidents are indicated with a fourth digit 8 in the transport accident section. If it's on otherwise not during military or war operations. You can still have an accident with a military vehicle. In that case, you do use a code for the transport accident, usually a fourth digit 8. If a military vehicle is involved in an accident, use a code for military, not type of accident. For example, a patient was a truck driver who collided with a military motorcycle. Use code for truck driver collided with military vehicle, not truck driver collided with motorcycle. So what's important is that it's military. That takes precedent over the fact that it's a motorcycle. External cause codes list the patient's vehicle or means of transportation first, then the other vehicle involved. For example, a patient in a car has an accident with a dump truck. This is the patient. So find accident transport car collided with dump truck. If you look at the very beginning of the guidelines for transport accidents, you'll see very specific definitions for the types of vehicles. And this is important for what specifically is considered a dump truck or a special vehicle or an agricultural vehicle. So let's look at the first subcategory of transport accidents. These are land accidents. These involve pedestrians, pedestrian conveyance, and motor vehicles. We're going to divide the transport accidents into land vehicles, water vehicles, air vehicles. The guidelines state that at least one of the land vehicles must be moving at the time of the accident. If the vehicles are not in motion, use another code. For example, if a patient was injured while a tractor was being repaired, use code W30.81, not a code for transport accident, because the tractor was not in motion. And also assume that the accident was on a public highway if it's not specified. Within the category of land accidents or accidents involving pedestrians, people on foot, or using pedestrian conveyances, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. Note that the code for the injury is listed first, so you use a code for the injury from the alphabetic index first, and then you're going to use an external cause code. To find the correct codes for a pedestrian, here are questions to ask. What was the patient doing when injured? What happened? Where was the patient? And when was treatment given? These will take you down step by step so you get all the information that you need. A pedestrian is on foot, walking or running at the time of the accident. In the external cause index, find accident transport, pedestrian, on foot, collision with, type of vehicle, traffic, or non-traffic. So pedestrian on foot collided with a vehicle, and the accident occurred either in traffic or non-traffic. If the pedestrian accident does not involve traffic, involve a vehicle, see other external cause codes. So if a pedestrian, someone walking down the street, falls, trips, slips, runs into another person, these are not transport accidents. In this case, you're going to look up in the external cause index what was the cause of the accident, a fall, a trip, whichever is appropriate. So pedestrian conveyance, this is like roller skates. Conveyance means transporting someone from one place to another. So roller skates, sled, things like that. So here are the questions to ask for pedestrian conveyance. What was the patient doing when injured? What happened? Where was the patient? And when was treatment given? So what's a pedestrian conveyance? Well, pedestrian conveyance is roller skates, skateboard, scooter, ice skates, sled, snowboard, snow skis, wheelchair, baby stroller, anything that transports a person from one place to another. Be careful with using the index. In fact, you want to mark this off in your index. Pedestrian, conveyance, pedestrian, on foot. These are intermingled in the tabular list. And also in the external cause index, you want to mark those off too. So how do you look up pedestrian conveyance? Well, you find accident, transport, pedestrian conveyance, then type of conveyance, and then collision or fall. Did the patient just fall out of the wheelchair or off the skateboard, or did they run into somebody or something? So next, let's look at pedal cycles. The questions to ask for these are, what happened? Who was the patient? Where was the patient? And when was treatment given? Now the external cause index uses the term pedal cycle. We're more familiar with bicycle, tricycle, unicycle. But this also includes a rickshaw or one of those passenger carts like this that you sometimes see on the beach or sometimes in big cities. I think of them mostly as on the beach. So in the index, find transport accident, pedal cyclist, collision or non-collision, while boarding or alighting, getting in or getting off, and then vehicle, or driver or passenger, collision or non-collision. So there's several different ways to look these up. So let's move on to another type of land vehicle, motor vehicles. An injury code is listed first, as always, and here are the questions to ask. What happened? Who was the patient? Where was the patient? And when was treatment given? External cause index includes several separate entries for each type of vehicle. Agriculture vehicle, like the tractor I mentioned before, all-terrain vehicle, ambulance, animal rider. You don't really think of as a motor vehicle, but it's thrown into this category anyway. Bus occupant, car occupant, military, motorcyclist, pickup truck. In the external cause index, look up accidents, transport, then type of vehicle the patient was in. For example, accident, transport, pickup truck. And then you find what the category, the status of the patient. Driver, hanger-on, or passenger. Then collision or non-collision. In traffic or non-traffic, or while boarding or alighting. Traffic or non-traffic, boarding or alighting. So I think a lot of the problem with these transport accident codes is the index, which is very confusing, I think. So let's move on to watercraft. First, list the code for the injury, then what was the patient doing, what happened, who is the patient, and when was treatment given. In the external cause index for watercraft, you're going to find watercraft, accident, transport, then watercraft, causing, and then these are the indents under that: injury, fall on board, fire on board, hit by falling object, non-powered or powered, struck by striker, struck by swimmer. And then under that, there'll be powered or non-powered craft, and then the type of vehicle. So non-powered craft, such as this one or or this one, powered craft, such as one of these. So let's look at air vehicles, the final category. Here's some questions to ask. First, list the code for the injury, and then what was the patient doing, what happened, who was the patient, and when was the patient given? When was treatment given? From the external cause index, find accident, transport, aircraft, occupant, non-powered or powered, and then type of aircraft under each one of those categories. And how was the patient injured? They fell from the aircraft. They injured by machinery on the aircraft. They were on ground when the aircraft environment, like something fell from the airplane or the airplane crashed. Rotating propeller injury, struck by object falling from the aircraft or while boarding or alighting. In addition to transport codes, transport accident codes, there are other codes in the external cause section that might be reported. Place of occurrence at the time of the injury, which are Y92, and patient status at the time of injury. List the transport accident codes that we've talked about before other external cause code, then patient status code, then list place of occurrence code. These codes do not require a 7th digit for when treatment occurred. This is because these codes are only used for the initial treatment. So let's look at external cause codes, Y99. These say who is the patient, the work status of the person at the time of the event, and then again, these codes are only used for the initial treatment. These codes include only 4 digits to specify the patient's status. So Y99.0, civilian activity done for income or pay. The person was working at the time of the injury. Y99.1, military activity. Y99.2, volunteer activity. Y99.8, other external status. And Y99.9, unspecified. The guidelines say don't use Y99.9, unspecified, if status is not documented. Well, you might ask, if you're not supposed to use the code, then why the heck is it in there? I don't know. Good question. Just right next to that code, do not use. You're going to use only one external cause status code for each case. How do you find these? An external cause, in the index, find status of external cause or external cause status, either one to where you want to go. Place of occurrence codes are used to indicate where the patient was at the time of the accident. Again, in most cases, these codes are used only for the initial visit. There's only one exception. In the rare instance when a new injury occurs during hospitalization, an additional place of occurrence code can happen. For example, a patient's taken to the hospital after an accident in a park. So you have a place of occurrence for park. When receiving follow-up treatment at an outpatient clinic, the patient falls on a slippery floor and breaks a bone. You could list a place of occurrence for the park for the first encounter and a clinic for the second encounter. But in most cases, you're only going to use it once, only going to use it for the initial encounter. And again, these are not going to have final digits for encounter since they're only used at the initial encounter. So here's some examples of place of occurrence for different transport accidents. For example, for land vehicles, you got driveway, gas station, street, highway, race course, railway station, skating rink, riding school. For water vehicles, you can say the type of water, excuse me, river, land, pond. For an aircraft, it could be at an airport, it could be on a military base. Now, you're not going to have a place of occurrence for sky, but you might want to use one for an airport or a military base. So list only one place of occurrence code. Don't use these codes. If the specific place is not documented or not applicable, don't use Y92.9. That's unspecified place. Again, it said the guidelines say do not use this. Why is there a code? I don't know. Write in at Y92.9, do not use. Don't use place of occurrence transport vehicle with the transport accident code. That would be repetitive, unnecessary. The guidelines specifically say don't do that. Now, so why do they even have these codes? Well, they might be used in other situations. An example might be two people in the back seat of a car who get into a fight and one is injured. The car is not moving. Now, there are other possible codes used in some circumstances. An injury may be due in all or in part to an airbag. So in the external cause index, you could find struck by airbag, and then there's different codes for driver's side, front passenger side, and other. So during an accident, the airbag may be deployed and cause additional injuries. And so then you would add, in addition to the transport accident code for airbag. This is my favorite, injury due to cell phone use. That just drives me crazy to see people making a left turn talking on their phone. Cell phone, Y93.C2, in the external cause index, find activity, cellular, telephone. That's kind of non-intuitive, so that's important to note that one. Activity, cellular, telephone. An exploding tire, like on a bicycle or even possibly on a car, is W39 category. Find exposure, pressure, tire. Okay, I'm going to do some practice. The best way to learn this is to practice. So here's the practice. Closed fracture, patient fell while getting off his bicycle. He was working as a volunteer, delivering food to homebound patients, initial encounter. The accident occurred on a residential street. So for the injury, the fracture, you're going to look up in the alphabetic index. So remember the questions. What happened? Who was the patient? Where was the patient? When was treatment given? So let's answer these questions. What happened? Injury while alighting a bicycle. Who was the patient? Volunteer. Where was the patient? Traffic, residential street. When was treatment given? Initial encounter. So in the external cause index, you're going to look up accident, transport, pedal cyclist, non-collision, traffic while boarding or alighting. This leads you to code V18.3XX. You're going to add a final digit A for the initial encounter. You need those two X's for placeholders. Does this give you all the information you need, the V18.3? No, not. So we do have covered this. We've covered traffic. We've covered initial encounter. But you see, we haven't indicated volunteer or residential street. We need to find code for status, volunteer activity, and place of occurrence, residential street. Volunteer, residential street. So look up status of external cause, volunteer activity, Y99.2. Place of occurrence, look up place of occurrence, street and highway, local residential or business street, Y92.414. So the final answer for this is an accident code, Y18.3AA, and that should have it. A. Place of occurrence, Y92.414, and status of external cause, Y99.2. So let's look at another practice, different kind of case. Bus driver hit a car. The bus's airbag went off, causing contusions of the driver's right chest area. The bus was on a state road at the time of the accident, initial encounter. For injury, we're going to look up in the alphabetic index. But the questions we need to ask is what happened, who was the patient, where was the patient, when was treatment given? So what happened? Well, this was a collision, bus hit car, right? Who was the patient? The patient was a driver, so they were working for pay. Where was the patient? You're in traffic. When was treatment given? Initial encounter, okay? And the external cause index, you're going to look up accident, transport, bus, driver, collision with, car, in traffic. This leads you to V73.5XXA. You need to add those placeholders and a final digit A. What information have we captured so far? Well, collision, bus hit car, driver, traffic, and an encounter. We still need information about the airbag, A, and state road. So we're going to find airbag. We're going to look up struck by airbag, W22.11A, the status, Y99.0, working for pay, and place of occurrence, Y92.413, state road. Place of occurrence is index, is in the index as a main term. Okay, here's another practice. Patient was nearly drowned when her luxury cruise ship sank in a harbor off Fort Lauderdale. The patient was on her honeymoon. Initial encounter. For the injury, nearly drowned, see the alphabetic index. What was the patient doing? What happened? Who was the patient? And when was the patient? And when was the treatment? So here we have the answers to the question. What was the patient doing? They were riding in an aircraft. They were honeymooning. What happened? Drowning or submersion, sinking ship. Who was the patient? Involved in leisure activity. That's a honeymoon is leisure activity. When was the treatment given? Initial visit. In the external cause index, find accident, transport, watercraft. This refers you to drowning due to accident watercraft. So you go back to drowning due to accident watercraft, sinking, powered passenger ship, V90.11XA. So this is what we've discovered so far, what we've included in this code. What was the patient doing? They were on board a cruise ship. what happened, drowning or submersion. It's got that information. When was treatment given, initial visit, where was the patient in a harbor. So we have left honeymooning and in a harbor. So the external cause index finds status of external cause, leisure activity. Honeymooning is a leisure activity. Y99.8. In the external cause index, find place of occurrence, harbor, Y92.89. So here are the final answers. You have 3 codes for this. And remember, in all of these, if it's a follow-up visit, it's a subsequent visit, you're going to code only the first one. You're not going to code status or place of occurrence. Here's some suggestions on notes, underlining, and highlighting for your book. This will help you find these codes more easily. In the index, underline accident transport. You'll notice there are many entries in this category, which can be confusing. I suggest you underline the type of vehicle, driver, passenger, occupant, hanger-on, collision, non-collision. This will help you to navigate this better. This will catch your eye and take you to the right place, because otherwise you can get really bogged down in this index. In the tabular list, write notes next to Y99.9 and Y92.9. Do not use these codes. And you might also write in the questions listed in this video. What was the patient doing? What happened? Who was the patient? When was treatment given? Not all cases will have answers to all these questions, but you can use them as a checklist to make sure you have everything covered, just like we did in the video where I wrote down answers to the questions and then crossed out what I had answered, and then what else do I have to look for. And this will help you make sure you've got everything covered. This completes this lesson. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. Here's how to contact me. Here where you can find my books. I have a whole book on external causes. These are available on Amazon. You can either use this link or go to Amazon Books and type in my last name, Tropin. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to have more lessons up soon. Thank you.